cosmic totem pole. So in this movie, Stanley Kubrick has attempted to span really an unprecedented range of ideas right back to our origins, the origins of the human race 3 million years ago. This in itself is a tremendous challenge to any movie maker, and I have seen this Dawn of Man footage, which I think is in itself going to be historic. But from these beginnings, which are based on the recent discoveries of the origin of man, particularly by Dr. Leakey in Africa, we go on to the year 2001, which is only, of course, 33 years ahead of us, and try to convey the technology that will exist then, or that may exist. We've had great cooperation from the aerospace industry. I think the care and attention to detail that has been given to the equipment, to the hardware in this movie is quite unprecedented. And this establishes, I think, a sense of realism which will make it impossible to believe that the year 2000 is not going to be like this. I seriously thought that we may have a profound effect on spaceship design in the years to come. People will be doing things they saw in this movie, even real spaceship designers, even though it may not be the best way of doing it, they will sort of unconsciously be affected by some of the concepts. Literally scores of industrial firms who have given them their time and their experts, so that the final result does have this feeling of reality, of solidity. Yet at the same time, I do want to stress that this is not documentary. You need this realistic background to establish the basis on which the adventure and the excitement of the movie can take place, so that people accept that these things may be so. And in the end of the movie, in the incredible final sequence, we go beyond today's science, as we must, into a realm which I think can best be described as spiritual. And here we're up against a very difficult problem, because you know, in the last few weeks, there's been this tremendous excitement among the astronomers over the extraordinarily precise and rhythmic radio pulses coming from the direction of the point between Vega and Altair, which may yet turn out to have a natural explanation, but its periodicity and characteristics are so extraordinary that no explanation as yet seems very feasible. Sooner or later, we expect we will receive proof that other intelligence exists in this universe. This may come next week. It may not come for 100 years. But I think this movie will serve, besides its purpose as entertainment, it may help to prepare the human race for something that inevitably will come. Thank you.
If you have any questions to ask Mr. Clark, would you please indicate them? Mr. Clark would be pleased to attempt to answer them for you.
Before putting Mr. Clark back on, I want to thank him on behalf of MGM, and I want to state unequivocally that MGM is not responsible for these sounds from outer space. Arthur, thank you very much. I'm sure that the people will enjoy hearing your answers to any of the questions which may provoke them at this time. And okay.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I'll be very glad to do what I can to field your queries.
Yes, would you care to make one or two comments on the possibility of a relatively close extraterrestrial civilization giving us, say, millions of years of advanced technological knowledge in perhaps 100 years' time?
This is perfectly possible. And in fact, even if we did not establish two-way communication, even if we only sort of picked up signals from space, suppose, in fact, well, here's an example. Suppose the USA of 1868 was able to pick up your television transmissions today. Now, they would see the sort of technology that exists today. They wouldn't know how it worked, but even seeing that, seeing automobiles, airplanes, and all these things, that would be half the battle. They would know these things could be done, and then they would be done. So even a one-way reception of this sort of material could have a revolutionary impact on our society. And of course it could be too great a shock. This is what anthropologists call cultural shock. When one culture very much higher than another, when two cultures impinge, fatal conflict, and then it can be disastrous. This is why I think it's advisable to prepare as far as possible for this kind of thing, because I'm sure it is inevitable.
When you say fatal conflict, sir, it would be...
No,
I would imagine that an intelligence that far in advance would understand the dangers of war or of intemperate diplomatic action or whatever between solar systems.
You're quite right, of course. A really advanced culture would know about these dangers and would probably have been through this kind of thing many times and would know how to prevent this happening if it wished to. But it might not wish to. We don't know.
They would regard us perhaps as a dangerous species of lower life to be...
Henry the Flit.
What did you mean, please, by the term a metaphysical concept? What conception of metaphysical does this involve?
Well, I was using that as a general term of something, so much beyond our present technology and resources and engineering that it is almost spiritual.
Are you familiar with the Sir John Eccles' views on life and the universe? He is a Nobel laureate in neurology. It is his opinion that the Earth is the only place in the universe that is inhabited by highly intelligent beings. He says most of these statements about higher life come from engineers and physicists who know nothing about biology. And he says they don't realize how tremendously complex the human organism is. He doesn't think it could happen twice in one universe.
He is quite right. I'm sure...
I'm trying to shoot this idea of highly intelligent people full of holes, if you don't mind.
He is quite right in thinking the human organism probably does not occur twice in one universe. We are the product of a long chain of chance events which decided we should have 5 fingers instead of 6, and our 2 eyes should be here and not this away. They should work almost as well, and that we are probably unique, because we have adapted for our surroundings. But there must be millions of worlds on which life has evolved. We know now approximately how this happens, and there will be life forms on those, but none of them, I'm sure, will be sufficiently like us that we would mistake them for human beings, except on a very gloomy and smoggy afternoon or dark night. I am sure that there are many life forms that would look, they have the same engineering outlines, 2 arms, 2 legs, but they wouldn't be human, and this human by definition almost is us.
Would you care to predict or forecast when a unified field theory in physics may be available to us, which might possibly allow controlled gravity as a propulsion system?
Well, it'd be lovely if we could control gravity, but I'm afraid it's rather outside my sphere of competence, and I've heard a skeptical remark by one of my physicist friends that anti-gravity is for the birds. Well, I suspect that one day we will get some means of propulsion or control better than rockets, which are rather noisy. You may have remembered Walter Cronkite trying to hold the window in from 3 miles away from the Saturn launch. And we may have gravity control or something like this, but we need a new breakthrough in physics. But of course we always do get new breakthroughs eventually, and when the human race wants anything badly enough, it usually gets it. And sometimes when it doesn't.
May I be pedestrian and ask you about the unidentified flying objects?
Well, can I be pedestrian and give a brief reply? 1, if you've never seen an unidentified flying object, you are very unobservant. 2, if you've seen as many as I have, you won't believe in them. 3, they have nothing to do with visitors from space. 4, it is impossible to prove 3.
reducing the focus of this discussion to a somewhat more domestic political level, sir, do you think this film may change the climate of opinion and make the people, and through them our government, more receptive to expanded expenditures in space research?
I sincerely hope so, and in fact, I am fairly sure of this. It will, perhaps we've got to bypass the older generation and the current people in Congress, and the young people will be doing this. But there is a big educational problem here, and there's a grave danger that this country is going to be Sputnik again just 10 years after it happened the first time. The Russians have the Russian planetary space program is far more extensive than the American one, and far more determined, and although it has been far less successful. In almost every field, the United States is far ahead of the USSR in space exploration, in the hardware, the technology, the scientific results. But in one vital field, of course, the USSR is ahead in the building of big man-rated boosters. And I think it's no longer a secret that they have or will have soon a booster bigger than the Saturn V. And also, I think they're ahead in determination and understanding of what space means, because this goes back 50 years to the writings of Tsiolkovsky. All the pioneering works on space were published in Russia. They've always had a great interest in the subject. Even before the revolution, I don't know, it's an interesting psychological study why this should be. So there's a sort of feeling of determination there. And this is one of the things that may decide the future. However, if the United States doesn't lose its nerve in this field, and it's obviously in danger of doing so through distraction with other admittedly vital problems, if it doesn't lose its nerve, it can maintain its lead in all the fields where it is ahead, and can, I think, get ahead of any other country in the world. And to most people, I'm afraid it is still regarded as a kind of technological Olympics, which admittedly to some extent it is. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing, as I think most people in this free enterprise society will admit. Sometimes if you are racing somebody, you go a lot faster than if you aren't. But there is a job of salesmanship to be done, and many of us are trying to do this. If I may work in another commercial, I've got a book on this subject called The Promise of Space coming out next month, and the Book of the Month Club are doing this. So I hope this will have a wide impact on the public to make them realize that the space has promise, tremendous promise. And although it would be fatal if we used its lure to distract us from some of our down-to-earth problems, nevertheless, many of those problems can be solved, and some of them may only be solved through space technology.